Good evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight's webinar with our registered dietitian, Crystal Pace. I will give everyone a few more minutes to join us, and then we'll get started shortly. All right, I still see people trickling in, but we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you, everyone, for joining this evening for our webinar, Busting Common Cancer Food Myths. Before I get started, I would love to hear and see, please use the chat to type in where you're calling or viewing in from so I know that you can hear me, your state, your location, your part of the world. I see North Carolina and Maine, Florida, Canada, Los Angeles, close to where I am. Wonderful. Thank you. It's so wonderful to see so many of you here this evening. Before we get started, please use the Q&A function if during the webinar you find yourself with any questions you'd like us to ask during the Q&A portion. And a quick note on that, we are scheduled to run 75 minutes. There is so much information in this webinar, as you'll soon see. We may go to 90 minutes. If you have to drop off, do not worry. You will get a recording that includes the slide deck in your email. As well, these will both be available on our website as well. Closed captioning is available in English. We are the Anti-Cancer Lifestyle Program. If this is your first time with us, welcome. I hope to see you at many more of these virtual events. Our program is free, it is doctor recommended, and we have a host of expert-led resources to help you reduce your risk of cancer, cancer recurrence, and chronic illness. You can get started and explore more on our site, anticancerlifestyle.org. And as you'll soon learn, we have an abundance of free resources. These virtual events, our entire program, and our very popular ebooks. Pictured are just a few of them that relate to diet in particular that we have out. These are accessible via we'll just input your email and we'll send this to you. And you will learn even more about topics we're talking about today and even further in the areas of nutrition and diet. Our online course is completely self-paced and doctor recommended. We also have a new app, so you can access it from literally anywhere, your phone, your tablet, or your computer. We want you to learn wherever is most comfortable for you on your own time. You may have already explored our diet module. If you have not, a few topics that what we do touch on in that module are benefits of a plant-based diet, healthy oils, the power of herbs and spices, which we also have an excellent ebook on, and eating organic foods on a budget. So please, you might be inspired after this to get started with our diet module. Like I said earlier, there is no order you have to take our modules in. We have a Facebook community. It's just a more intimate area on social media to get to know us, to get to know each other, and to explore your anti-cancer lifestyle. If you'd like to request to join this community, our marketing director, Nicole, will put into the chat a link directly to this community. We are a nonprofit, and we are able to offer all our amazing complimentary services because of your generous donations. So please, especially as we enter the giving season, consider the Anti-Cancer Lifestyle Program. We want to continue to be here for everyone, and we believe that none of this evidence-based information should ever come behind a paywall. Who you have with you today. Myself, my name is Erica. I am the social media director for the program. Crystal Pace, our registered dietitian nutritionist of the Anti-Cancer Lifestyle Program, and your guide for today. And in the background, my friend and our marketing director, Nicole Jones, who will be supporting me in the chat. So if you have any questions, like I said, drop it in the chat and she'll be there to address them. You may know Crystal. This might not be your first time seeing Crystal if you've attended any of our past diet-related webinars. She is a registered dietitian nutritionist, a board-certified health and wellness coach, and a certified eating counselor. Crystal, take it away.
Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction, Erica. I am really grateful that you all are here with me, and we're going to do one of my favorite things this evening, which is debunking some common food myths, specifically cancer food myths. So the myths we will be debunking include that sugar feeds cancer and should be avoided, eating soy foods causes cancer, consuming dairy products causes cancer, the myth that if I already have cancer, then it doesn't matter what I eat or drink. Myth number 5, the more vitamin and mineral supplements, the better. Myth number 6, juice cleanses, coffee enemas, and other detoxes are good for cancer prevention and treatment. And myth number 7 is it's too expensive to eat an anti-cancer diet, meaning eating in a way that we know can help reduce cancer risk. So, are you ready? Let's do it. Let's dive in. So myth number 1, sugar feeds cancer and should be avoided. So this is a very common fear. I see it very frequently in my practice. Because we know that cancer cells do thrive on sugar, meaning they like to use sugar or glucose for energy, there's this idea that, well, then we need to avoid sugar to, treat cancer and prevent cancer. So it's caused a lot of people to become really concerned about sugar and cancer. So let's talk more about sugar and cancer. So what do we know? We know that sugar is a carbohydrate, and all of our body cells, including cancer cells, depend on sugar in the form of glucose for energy. So let's talk about this because it's such an important concept to grasp. So sugar is a carbohydrate, and carbohydrates is this fancy scientific word for any food that will break down into sugar in the body, also known as glucose. So when we eat foods that have carbohydrates, such as sugar, what happens is we break those food down and I digest the sugar and absorb it, and that turns into glucose in our bloodstream. So if you've ever gone to the doctor, they've probably checked your blood glucose levels before, and that's also known as your blood sugar. So we know that sugar comes in many different forms. We're going to be talking more about added sugars and natural sugars. And the point here to keep in mind is that sugar is a carbohydrate. And just like protein and fat, we need carbohydrates regularly throughout the day to fuel our healthy cells. So yes, cancer cells do like to run on sugar so they could grow and multiply and thrive. And our healthy cells really, our healthy cells run best on sugar as well. So glucose or sugar is the preferred energy source for not just cancer cells, but also for our healthy cells. So a lot of individuals, there's something that tends to perpetuate this myth that sugar causes cancer. And that's what we see when we get into talking about PET scans. So let's talk more about PET scans to really help us understand why this is a myth that sugar causes cancer and should be avoided. So essentially, maybe if you've had a PET scan done, but a PET scan involves injecting a patient with a radioactive sugar, so a sugar solution, to detect cancer. So we know that cancer cells have an excessive need for energy in the form of glucose. And this is why cancerous tumors light up when we see the results of PET scans that someone does have cancer, when patients are injected with this sugar solution. And that can help us identify where tumors might be in the body because we're seeing these sites where sugar is being used rapidly. Now, here's what we really need to keep in mind is this point I made earlier is that all of our body's cells need glucose for energy, not just cancer cells. So we don't have this way to deprive cancer cells of glucose and just feed our healthy cells. So, this is why restricting our intake of all foods that provide carbohydrates, included sugar, is not recommended and has not been found to be effective for cancer prevention and treatment on a general level. Now, let's get into some facts, though, about different types of carbohydrates and sugar in our diet, because there is something to be said about the type of sugar we're consuming and how that relates to our cancer risk. So, what do we know? We do know that increased added sugars in our diet above recommended limits, especially those found in processed foods like sugary beverages and processed foods like granola bars, ice cream, candy, other baked goods, granola, and so many more foods, sugary cereals. These are the types of sugars that have been found to be associated with increased risk of cancer. So the key here is added sugars, which in a nutshell are sugars that food companies are adding on our behalf that are already present in processed foods and convenience foods. Now, something that is really important to keep in mind, I work, when I'm seeing my patients, I have a lot of people fearing and being so scared about, the sugar that they're adding in their own home cooked meals or beverages. And I want to be clear that this is not the sugar that we're talking about here. Most of the sugar that's coming from, that's in the standard American diet, which has been associated with cancer, is coming from the sugar that food companies are adding on our behalf. So, this is not to worry about the sugar that you're adding at home, like adding a teaspoon or two of honey to your green tea, as an example. Now, with that being said, we want to be mindful of how much sugar we're adding at home. Drinking a cup or two of green tea with some honey is different than, 10 cups of green tea with some honey, right? But generally speaking, we're really talking about when we're talking about sugar and cancer risk, it's the added sugars found in a lot of these processed foods and convenience foods. So then you might be thinking, well, what are the recommended limits for added sugar? Well, it depends on who you ask. There's many different organizations that have different recommended limits. I want to provide an example. The American Heart Association has recommended limits that I think can be helpful to keep in mind, especially as you're label reading for added sugars, which we're going to talk about in just a moment. So, the American Heart Association recommends limiting added sugars for adult women to no more than 6 teaspoons a day, and for adult men, less than 9 teaspoons a day. So, less than 6 teaspoons of added sugar for women and less than 9 teaspoons for men. In summary, though, really, the take home message here is limiting our intake of added sugars as much as feasible, as much as possible. So, to do that, we have to be able to read labels for added sugars because, as I mentioned, a lot of these added sugars sneak into products when we're consuming products that have been processed. So, how you look for added sugars is when you're looking at a nutrition facts label, which is on anything that comes in a package. I want you to go right to the added sugars. So, if we see here on the left, I highlighted the added sugars, and this is actually a nutrition facts label for a strawberry flavored yogurt. So we can see the serving size is 1 container and it says 13 grams of added sugar. Now, a lot of my clients tell me that they looked at the total carbohydrates on the label. And that's actually not what we want to look at here. It's not helpful. We'll talk about this more in a little bit, but it's really not helpful because that will tell us natural sources of carbs in the food, not necessarily the that have been added. So, for example, fruit has carbohydrates, and whole grains like brown rice and quinoa and other whole grains have carbohydrates, but that's not the carbs we're concerned about for cancer risk, it's these added sugars. So go directly to the added sugars. And here we see that this one container, so always look at the serving size, which in this case is 1 strawberry yogurt, one container has 13 grams of added sugar. Well, you may hear that or see that, and it could be hard to picture. Well, how much really is that? What does that mean? This is where this tip is very helpful. So if you could remember this tip, it's going to get you far in label reading for added sugar. So the tip is that there's 4 grams of sugar in 1 teaspoon of sugar. So if you were to measure out a teaspoon of, regular cane sugar, there's about 4 grams of sugar in that teaspoon. So if we go back to this yogurt to figure out how many teaspoons of sugar are they adding so we could better picture it, we can divide 13 divided by 4, and that comes out to about 3¼ teaspoons. So in this one container of strawberry yogurt, there's 3¼ teaspoons of added sugar. So that's why I like the American Heart Association guidelines, because if we know that, to give the example of less than 6 teaspoons a day of added sugars for women, then we can easily see how this 3¼ teaspoons is a little more than half just coming from one yogurt of the added sugar allotment for the total day, just to put it in perspective. So ideally, we want to consume products with 0 added sugars. I tell all of my clients, I say, I trust you way more than I trust the food company. So I'd much rather someone buy a plain yogurt and add some strawberries and maybe a drizzle of honey, adding their own sweetener, than a food company adding the sugar on their behalf, because odds are we're going to add less sugar than the food company is for us. So ideally, consuming products with no added sugar, or, if you're buying a product and you can't find one that has no added sugar, with cereal, I found this is virtually impossible. I feel like most cereals out there have some sort of added sugar in them. So looking at the label and at least getting one that has the lower added sugar. So the lower number, as close to 0 as you can get per serving. And something else that you could look at is look at the ingredient list. And I want to give you some hidden forms of sugar that you'll see in ingredient list. So let's look at the ingredient list for this strawberry flavored yogurt. We know ingredients are listed by weight. So meaning whatever's mostly in that product is going to be listed in the first couple of ingredients. So if we look at the ingredients of this strawberry flavored yogurt, which I have here on the right highlighted, we see that the first ingredient is low-fat milk. And then the second ingredient is sugar. And what made me really sad is it comes before strawberries. I feel like in a strawberry flavored yogurt, we would want more strawberries than sugar. Ideally, we want no sugar, right? So looking at the ingredient list, and here's some other forms of added sugar, because sometimes it's not very obvious. It may not just say sugar, that are code words for sugar. So things like any syrup, like corn syrup, high fructose corn syrup, malt syrup, cane juice, fruit juice concentrate, dextrose, maltose. There's lots of hidden forms of sugar. So you can check out the ingredient list as well and look for a form of sugar that's lower on the ingredient list if it's in it at all. So I want to give another example too. I like using this example in my practice. Want to give the example of a 12-ounce soda. So, in a 12-ounce soda, there's about 10 teaspoons of added sugar in one 12-ounce soda. So if we are keeping the American Heart Association guidelines in mind, we already know 10 teaspoons is more than, it's already exceeding just from that one soda, not considering anything else that person's eating or drinking that day that may have added sugar. We already exceeded the recommendations, the American Heart Association recommendations. So the added sugar adds up, especially when food companies are adding it on our behalf. Okay. So what I want to talk about is another fact about carbohydrates and cancer. And remember, sugar is a type of carbohydrate. That there's many factors that influence the relationship between the carbohydrates that we eat and our risk for cancer development. And one factor is the type of carbohydrate consumed. So let's talk more about this. So if you remember, carbs or carbohydrates, carbs for short, includes many different foods that ultimately will break down into sugar in our bloodstream. Now, not all carbs are created equal, meaning they affect metabolism differently. Different carbs will break down more slowly and more quickly, which impacts our blood sugar regulation and therefore cancer risk. So let's talk about simple carbs, and sugar is a simple carb. So simple carbs, examples are sugar, also fruit has simple carbs, like fructose in fruit is a simple sugar, maple syrup, honey, cane sugar is a simple carb, and essentially, these are carbs that are broken down and absorbed more quickly, especially when fiber isn't present. So, this is important to remember. So, simple carbs, when they come packaged with fiber, as in fruit, the fiber helps slow down how fast that simple carb is digested and absorbed, which has favorable results for our blood sugar levels. It helps us maintain healthy blood sugars, which then can help us manage inflammation and reduce our IGF-1 levels. If you've ever heard of that before, it's something that plays a role in cancer risk. So we know managing our blood sugars is important when it comes to cancer risk. And packaging simple carbs with fiber is a way nature does that for us. It's pretty amazing. So this is why I tell all my clients, don't worry about the sugar in fruit. It comes packaged with fiber. So yes, fruit has a simple sugar such, fructose is the simple sugar in fruit, but it comes packaged with fiber, which helps slow down how fast that sugar is going to be digested and absorbed, and it's going to be way less likely to cause blood sugar spikes. Complex carbohydrates, because we have simple carbs and complex carbs. And complex carbs come from foods like beans, whole grains, and starchy vegetables. So, examples of whole grains are oatmeal, brown rice, millet, barley. There's so many whole grains out there. And starchy vegetable examples are our winter squash, which is in season now, thinking butternut squash, acorn squash, spaghetti squash. Potatoes are a type of starchy vegetable, corn, and peas. And these foods, are beans, lentils, whole grains, starchy veggies. They have what we call complex carbohydrates, which are digested more slowly, especially because many of them are combined with fiber in these whole foods. So that's going to impact our blood sugar levels very differently than, let's say, having pure table sugar, right? Or added sugar from processed foods that don't have fiber. So the key takeaway here is focus on the quality of carbohydrates that you're eating, mainly choosing carbohydrates that are coming from our whole foods and minimally processed foods, things like fresh or frozen fruits, vegetables, starchy vegetables, winter squash, and all these foods that I just mentioned. So we do want to limit added sugars by reading nutrition facts labels. We know that's important when we're thinking about, cancer risk in sugar. We don't have to avoid sugar, right? I always like to remind all my clients that even the American Heart Association guidelines, the recommendations isn't zero, right? So we can have some added sugar. We don't need to avoid. We do want to be mindful, and especially when the food companies are adding it for us. And another tip I want to share, along with consuming our carbs in whole food sources, is how you eat your carbs matters immensely when we talk about blood sugar regulation. I work with a lot of individuals who have pre-diabetes and diabetes, and this is a core concept I use to help regulate blood sugars. And this concept is pairing carbohydrates, such as the foods we've been talking about, like potatoes, corn, peas, whole grains, beans, with a fiber source, which many of them come packaged with fiber, and protein and fat. So let's review some examples because that combination has benefits for our blood sugar control and ultimately cancer risk. So if we paired an example of this is if you had some brown rice, which is a complex carbohydrate, paired with salmon, which gives our body some protein and omega-3 fat, and added some extra fiber to that meal. Brown rice has a little fiber, but you're going to get more if you add some veggies to that meal. That combination of the carb, the protein, some fat, and fiber helps slow down how fast that the carbohydrate, in this example, rice, will be digested and absorbed, and therefore affect blood sugar levels very differently compared to if you just had a bowl of rice alone without the protein, the fat, and the added fiber. Okay. So if you're interested in learning more about sugar and cancer, definitely be sure to check out our Sugar and Cancer ebook for more information. Let's move on to myth number 2. Myth number 2 is eating soy foods can cause cancer. So I want to just give examples of soy foods, since some people may not be able to picture what soy foods consist of. So soy-based foods include miso, edamame, tempeh, soy milk, tofu, just to give some examples. And a lot of people fear soy, fearing that it could cause cancer, specifically hormone-dependent cancers such as breast and prostate cancer. And how was this fear born? How did it come about? Well, there was some early research done on using rats. So essentially, we had early research that looked at this concept and studied, what happened when rats ate soy and what happened to their development of cancer or cancer risk. And essentially, what these early studies found is that when compounds in soy were consumed by rats, this did result in growth of estrogen receptor positive breast cancer cells and promoted breast cancer growth. So, this is part of why this is where this fear was born from. Now, here's what's really important to keep in mind. Later research in humans, we have a lot of studies in humans now, revealed that rodents, essentially metabolize the compounds in soy very differently than we do. So, what we're actually seeing in human studies is the opposite effect, that because we metabolize the compounds in soy very differently than rats, that actually, it resulted in this, now we know that research is outdated now that we have human studies, and we're seeing the opposite effects. Soy foods can actually help us prevent hormone-dependent cancers such as breast and prostate cancer. So I think the media and the public, we didn't really do a good job in getting the message to the public that, yes, there were these early studies, but the research is now outdated. That's not what happens in humans. So we know that soy does not increase cancer risk and can actually reduce cancer risk. There's many different reasons why researchers are speculating that we're seeing these results in human studies. Just to give some examples, we know that soy has anti-estrogenic effects, meaning it could actually help our body mitigate the effects from too much human estrogen. And also, I find this one fascinating. Soy may also help us prevent breast cancer risk by inhibiting the growth of blood vessels necessary to fuel the tumor. So, soy can quite literally inhibit growth of the blood vessels that are essentially feeding the tumor so the tumor can't grow and thrive. So soy can there's other ways soy has been found to promote cancer cell death. So the opposite of what we saw in those early rat studies. Now you may be wondering, wait a minute, doesn't soy contain estrogen? How does it not increase cancer risk then? Here's something really important we need to consider. Soy contains phytoestrogens, which are estrogen-like compounds found in soy, and they're also found in other plant foods, not just soy. But they're not the same as human estrogen. So I want to repeat this. Phytoestrogens in soy are not the same as human estrogen. And the phytoestrogens in soy have actually been found to help reduce our risk for cancer and even slow cancer growth. So we have the research to support that soy has been linked to lower risk for certain cancers, not just breast and prostate cancer, but also lung, stomach, and colon cancers. We know that eating 1 to 2 servings a day of whole soy based foods has been found to decrease risk for breast cancer recurrence. Now, I want to share with you what a serving of soy consists of, because it could be hard to picture, what is 1 to 2 servings of soy foods a day? What does that look like? A serving of soy food or a soy beverage provides about 7 grams of protein. So, examples would be a cup of soy milk, 3 ounces, or about the size of a deck of cards to picture it, of tofu, a half a cup of edamame. So, eating just 1 to 2 servings, that could be a cup of soy milk when you make your oatmeal in the morning and, 3 ounces of tofu at lunch or dinner, has been found to decrease risk for breast cancer recurrence. We know that higher intake of soy foods has been associated with lower risk of death from breast cancer, especially estrogen receptive positive breast cancers. Up to 3 servings a day of soy foods have been consumed in Asian populations long term without any increased risk for breast cancer. And in fact, there is a much lower risk for developing breast cancer in Asia, where soy is a staple part of the daily diet. Traditional Asian diets, actually, it's very common to have at least 1 to 2 servings of a soy based food a day, and we're seeing lower risk for breast cancer. Now, it's worthwhile to talk about the different types of soy because it is recommended to consume a whole and minimally processed soy based foods instead of highly processed soy based products. So, what are whole soy based foods? That's going to include foods I mentioned already, like edamame, tofu, tempeh, and miso. And then highly processed soy examples are going to be ingredients that you may see on labels like soy protein isolate, soy isoflavones, soy protein concentrates that are added to products like many plant based meats on the markets, the imitation meats, isoflavone supplements, plant based protein powders, cereals, granola bars, and many more. And there's a couple reasons why we recommend getting your soy from whole soy based foods. Well, for one, whole soy foods are going to have more anti cancer benefits than their processed counterparts. So we see this time and time again in the nutrition literature. When we isolate compounds from whole foods, it doesn't have the same beneficial effects that we commonly see in the whole food. So I want to give you an example for this concept or this fact. So, tempeh, which is fermented soybeans, it's a minimally processed soy based food, has 5 times more soy isoflavones, which are the beneficial phytoestrogens found in soy that have anti cancer properties. So, tempeh has 4 to 5 times more of these compounds when compared to a vegetable burger made with processed soy based ingredients. So, we know you're going to get more nutritional benefits from the whole soy food. And whole soy based foods come without the addition of chemicals of concern, such as, for example, there's been reports of the process that we use to isolate soy protein isolate from the whole soy food using the chemical hexane. And you don't have to know much about hexane to get a sense that it's probably not something we want to be consuming. So, this is a reason, one out of many reasons, we recommend um, whole looking for products made with whole soybeans and also going organic. Because even if you are purchasing a product that may have an isolated soy based ingredient, then, the organic agriculture prevents the use of something like hexane and other potential concerns like exposure to pesticides, herbicides, and other toxins. Another reason to purchase whole soy based foods and consume them over these highly processed products is because a lot of these processed products, like imitation meats, have other ingredients that are often added that are concerning, like a lot of sugar, as we've been talking about, added sugars, and also salt or sodium. So these are things to keep in mind. So in summary, we know, in summary, we know soy actually can help reduce cancer. Reduce cancer risk. It does not contribute to the growth of cancer. And we know that eating more whole and minimally processed soy-based foods is recommended. And we want to minimize our intake of products that have those highly processed soy-based ingredients that are a far cry from the whole soy-based food. And check out our ebook on soy and cancer if you're interested in diving deeper. So, myth number 3, consuming dairy causes cancer. Let's talk about this. This is a myth, and let's dive into why. What do we know about dairy and cancer risk? Let's go through some facts. And before we dive into the facts, I just want to take a step back to really define what dairy means. So, dairy products includes milk and products made from ruminant milk, such as cow, goat, and sheep milk. And these include products like kefir, yogurt, lactose-free milks, buttermilk, ghee, butter, cheese, cream, and so on. So we're talking about a wide variety of products here. And we know that diets high in animal fat, including dairy products, have been associated with increased cancer risk. And I want to remind everyone here, association doesn't mean causation. And it is recommended that if you enjoy dairy products, you do so in moderation, partly because we know that diets high in animal fat have been associated with increased cancer risk. Now, I want to talk a little bit more about this because I think there's some really important nuances to consider. So, there are dairy products that have mostly fat and not much else, like butter and cream and half and half. And then we have dairy products that are going to have less of that animal fat than other dairy products, such as dairy products that are higher in protein, calcium, and other vitamins and minerals, such as milk, cheese, kefir, and yogurt. And one reason that there's many different reasons why researchers are speculating that diets higher in animal fat have been associated with increased cancer risk. And one of those reasons is animal fats, especially, excessively being pro-inflammatory. Now, there's something I want to share with you, and it relates to the Mediterranean diet, because I think if we can understand and think about the Mediterranean diet, this will actually help us really hone in on why this is a myth that that dairy causes cancer. So, the Mediterranean diet has been found to have benefits, including reduced risk of many cancers, including breast cancer. So, what is the Mediterranean diet? Well, it's the diet of the way people ate traditionally in the regions of the world, including southern Italy and Greece, around the 1970s. And this diet is characterized by a high intake of fruits, vegetables, legumes, such as beans, lentils, whole grains, fish, low intakes of, so not a lot of meat, so limited in meat. And this diet, the Mediterranean style diet, the traditional Mediterranean diet, does include a moderate amount of dairy products. So, mainly, if we look at the traditional diet and what dairy they were consuming, it mainly consisted of cultured dairy products, such as Greek yogurt and cheese like Parmesan cheese, right? These products that have been cultured, live cultures added and fermented to change the properties of the dairy. And if dairy caused cancer, then we wouldn't see these results that we see in the Mediterranean diet, this diet that includes moderate consumption of dairy, specifically from, things like yogurt, these cultured dairy products and cheese, then we wouldn't be seeing the results with decreased cancer risk. Now, here's some nuances to think about. Back in the 1970s, they didn't have the food preservation methods that we have now. So there wasn't refrigeration to store milk. We didn't have the pasteurizing process, right? So this is part of the reason why drinking a glass of milk wasn't common, because they didn't have ways to preserve to prevent the dairy from spoiling. So they cultured it to make it last longer and retain the nutrients. And what's also interesting is that the milk that they used wasn't so much cow milk as it was goat and sheep milk. So really interesting to think about that. And it can show us that, the research on dairy and cancer is we can't say that dairy causes cancer. And the Mediterranean diet data we have on reducing cancer risk that includes moderate amount of dairy products is one of the reasons why, or examples why we can't say that. Now, there are some important facts to keep in mind, and that's that dairy consumption has been associated with increased risk for prostate cancer. And specifically here, I want to point to milk because a lot of the studies are, there is this general association with dairy consumption and prostate cancer risk, increasing prostate cancer risk. And the concerning data is really pointing to milk. And even at low levels of milk consumption, we're talking about a couple tablespoons of milk, there's been a significant increase in prostate cancer risk. So I want you to keep that in mind. And emerging data, very limited, but some data that I've seen lately is that milk consumption, but not yogurt or cheese, a recent study revealed this, that has been associated with increased breast cancer risk, which if we take into account what we just learned about the Mediterranean diet, reducing risk for breast cancer, and it includes these cultured dairy products like yogurt and cheese, then we're seeing more recent studies that are actually kind of solidifying what they, maybe already knew in the 1970s. So just keeping that in mind with the milk and its association with prostate cancer. And, we're seeing some research with concerns for milk and breast cancer, although more research is needed. And to make it even more conflicting, dairy intake is strongly associated with reduced risk for colon cancer. So I say this, all of this to share with you the important facts to consider about dairy and cancer and to hone in on how the research on dairy and cancer is clearly unsettled. More research is needed. It's inconsistent. And part of the reason why is because when we look at, cancer risk and diets that incorporate dairy, many studies are lumping all these dairy products together, right? So looking at dairy and lumping milk in with yogurt and cheese and butter. And clearly there's, the research is pointing that there's some differences when it relates to cancer risk depending on the type of dairy. And the research also isn't looking at quality of dairy, like conventional versus organic dairy. We know there's more omega-3 anti-inflammatory fats in organic dairy, less exposure to harmful toxins, antibiotic-resistant bacteria. The studies aren't looking at the quality of dairy, and there's other factors. So this is part of the reason why we need more research, and the research is inconsistent and unsettled. So here are some tips to reduce cancer risk. If you do enjoy dairy, consume dairy in moderation and prioritize cultured dairy products such as yogurt and kefir, where you're getting those live active cultures and probiotics, which have benefits for health and well-being. If you choose to consume dairy products, it's recommended to purchase organic whenever possible. And as we've talked about in the sugar section, which I want to remind everyone here, choosing dairy products with no added sugars, such as going with a plain yogurt versus a flavored yogurt. I always trust you to add your sweetener more than I would trust a food company to add for you. And check out our dairy and cancer ebook if you're interested in learning more. Moving right along, let's debunk myth number 4. Myth number 4 is, since I already have cancer, then it doesn't matter what I eat or drink. So let's talk about some nutrition and cancer facts to help debunk this very common myth. Research shows us that nutrients can play a protective role during all stages of cancer formation, also known as carcinogenesis. These compounds within plants, such as phytochemicals and antioxidants and vitamins and minerals, have the potential to prevent and even slow cancer initiation and progression. So I wanted to share this chart with you. You will, as a reminder, have access to these slides. But I think this chart really helps us hone in on how foods have powerful anti-cancer effects that help us prevent cancer initiation, so aid in cancer prevention, and also help with preventing cancer progression. So to give you some examples, we know that cruciferous vegetables such as broccoli, cauliflower, cabbage actually help our body detoxify potential cancer causing compounds, also known as carcinogens. We know that foods like whole grains, nuts, carrots, watermelon, and so many more can help us repair our DNA. And another example, we know that there's tons of foods that help us reduce inflammation, such as flax seeds, chia seeds, turnips, other green leafy vegetables. And we know that managing inflammation can help make an environment that cancer doesn't like to thrive in. Inflammation fuels cancer. So we know that the way we eat can help us suppress or manage inflammation. So clearly, food matters during all stages of cancer formation and progression. And let's talk about another related myth that I felt was important because I hear it a lot in my practice. A lot of clients will tell me, Crystal, I started eating healthier and I'm exercising, but the number on the scale didn't go down. So is it even worth it? Am I reducing my risk? So the myth is, it doesn't matter if I'm exercising and improving my eating behaviors if I'm not seeing the number on the scale go down. This is completely false. Yes, there is an association of overweight and obesity with cancer. There's a strong association there, and there is more to consider here. So let's look at some facts. We know that engaging in health promoting behaviors such as exercising and eating a nourishing diet can improve health and disease regardless of any changes in weight. So to give you an example of this, we know that excessive consumption of sugar sweetened beverages is associated with an increased risk of cancer regardless of a person's weight status. Also, we have data to show us that engaging in physical activity can lower cancer risk significantly, even if the number on the scale doesn't change. We know that a poor diet is one of the leading risk factors that increases risk of cancer independent of weight status. So I really want to emphasize here, healthy lifestyle behaviors matter immensely when it comes to reducing cancer risk. Weight is not a behavior. If it was, we would all just be at the weight we want because we would have control over it and move on with our lives. But as I'm sure we've all uncovered, weight regulation is way more complex. So our behaviors, like how we eat and how we move, can impact our weight. Especially when it comes to cancer risk and risk for chronic health conditions, there's more to the picture here. We know that these healthy behaviors can positively impact, can reduce our cancer risk, regardless if the number on the scale doesn't change. So in summary, here's some take-home tips. We know nutrition matters. It absolutely does. And if we optimize our diet during cancer treatment, we know that can help provide the body with nutrients that are necessary for health and well-being to prevent significant malnutrition, which is associated with increased risk of death. It could help us prevent losing muscle mass caused by treatment side effects. I'm always recommending my clients, seek guidance from a registered dietitian, ideally an oncology dietitian that's part of the cancer care team if available. We know that nutrition education when someone's going through treatment has been associated with fewer treatment-related side effects, fewer hospitalizations, and even improved quality of life. And be sure to focus on proper nourishment after treatment as well, because we know nutrition impacts our risk of diet is a factor in our risk for cancer recurrence, and it can help us improve our post-treatment recovery. Okay, myth number 5. Let's debunk this one. The more vitamin and mineral supplements I consume, the better. It's very common for people to assume that supplements such as botanical, herbal supplements and vitamin and mineral supplements are good for us because they're natural, and many assume that they're safer than taking prescription medications. So, we know that 64 to 81% of cancer survivors are known to consume dietary supplements, which is a much higher frequency of use than the overall population. So, let's talk about some supplement facts. We know that dietary supplements fuel a multi-billion-dollar industry. There's a lot of money in making us believe that we need supplements. Supplements are not required to undergo pre market evaluation, which means that any adverse or negative effects of supplements are often not recognized until they're being reported by consumers. Because of this lack of regulation, it's virtually impossible to know what's actually in the dietary supplement. There's no legal requirements to test for the ingredients before these supplements go to market. I think this quote by Dr. Marion Nestle summarizes this beautifully, the concern with supplements, and that's what's actually in the bottles becomes a matter of faith. So let's go over some examples together. When a vitamin A supplement was pulled off the market and third party tested, it was found to have only 44% of the amount of vitamin A that was listed on the bottle. And for someone like me, a dietitian who, if someone has a vitamin A deficiency that I need to treat, that's really concerning that the supplement that they may be taking doesn't have enough vitamin A for them to replete their levels. A turmeric supplement, as another example, was found to have lead contamination when it was third party tested. So, a lot of people are taking turmeric, which, the active component of turmeric is curcumin. So these turmeric and curcumin supplements, and they're not realizing or knowing that there may be some heavy metal concerns with those supplements. And a last example, there was concern with green tea supplements when they were third party tested, finding low levels of EGCG, which is the active component in green tea that people are hoping to get when they're taking green tea supplements and spending money on these supplements that clearly some of the supplements aren't providing. So let's look at some more supplement facts, especially as it relates to cancer. So we know taking excessive doses of nutrients from supplements can actually promote cancer growth. An example of this is that taking high dose folic acid supplements may increase the growth of already present cancers. Some supplements can interact with cancer treatment drugs. Supplements like garlic supplements and St. John's wort. Now, I want to be clear, it's not garlic from whole food that we're talking about. It's garlic from supplements. Dietary supplement use, there's a time and place for it. It should really be directed towards treating and correcting a nutrient deficiency, and for those at risk from malnutrition due to difficulty eating because of cancer treatment related side effects. So if you're not getting enough in your diet, there's absolutely a time and a place for something like a multivitamin and mineral supplement, or if you have a nutrient deficiency like iron deficiency, we of course need to treat that with supplemental iron. And definitely consulting with a registered dietitian and your healthcare team so we can make sure to choose safer brands for you. And we know that the research examining the role of vitamin and mineral supplements in cancer prevention has actually failed to demonstrate a benefit. So we're not seeing benefits with taking vitamin and mineral supplements to prevent cancer. Now, what about antioxidants? Because a lot of people are taking antioxidant supplements because we know that antioxidants from food have powerful anti-cancer effects like vitamin C, selenium, vitamin A, vitamin E, beta carotene. So many people think, well, since that's good, more must be better. Well, let's look at the facts. We know that research regarding antioxidant supplementation during cancer treatment, chemotherapy, and or radiation therapy is mixed, and results from human and animal studies are actually quite contradictory. In animal studies, we see benefits of taking antioxidant supplements and how that could impact cancer treatment. But then when we try and reproduce those results in humans, there's actually studies that are saying that antioxidant supplements may reduce the effectiveness of cancer treatment and even support tumor growth, which we obviously don't want to do when we're going through cancer treatment. An example of this is glutathione, which is an antioxidant, very popular antioxidant supplement. It's contraindicated during active radiation therapy and most chemotherapy treatment. So, for right now, due to this concerning and conflicting data, there's really no general recommendation about using supplemental antioxidants during cancer treatment. We need more research, and definitely be sure to discuss any antioxidant supplements with your cancer care team. So I want to provide just some examples of safety concerns with some common supplements that people are taking. And, it really can hone in on how some may be good, but more definitely isn't better. And before we talk about specific supplements, I want to be clear, I'm not recommending these supplements. I'm only summarizing what has been found thus far regarding their safety. So it's always important to consult with your healthcare team, including your cancer care team, before taking any supplements. But to review an example of some supplement safety concerns, we have data to show that increased high doses of vitamin E and beta carotene supplements can actually increase our risk for cancer. We also know, some turmeric supplements have been combined with piperine, which is a spice in black pepper to help with the absorption. But that addition of the piperine may interact with some medication someone might be on. And what about supplements that have been found to be relatively safe? Well, turkey tail mushroom, for instance, and some other medicinal mushrooms, generally safe and well tolerated, has anti-cancer effects. Melatonin is another example. Relatively safe, well tolerated, has anti-cancer effects. So this just goes to show that there's, when it comes to each supplement, there's a lot to consider. Not only the safety data, but the treatment someone's receiving, the medication someone's on. So always consult with your healthcare team. A reminder, you will have access to these slides if you want to review the rest of these supplements here. And I do want to provide a really helpful resource for choosing supplements. Our colleagues at cancerchoices.org have evidence based information on how to source high quality supplements. And you can even look up specific supplements and get the data, the facts on the supplements specific to cancer. So I wanted to provide that resource, and we'll link to it in the chat. So here's some supplement tips. Since we know, and just to summarize too, since supplements might be safe, some might be safe, but some might be unsafe and have the potential to interfere with cancer treatments, we really just don't want to go out and start taking supplements because we, heard that they were good. The overall body of evidence does not support using dietary supplements as an effective strategy for reducing cancer risk and for cancer treatment. I'm always recommending a food first approach, meaning let's try and get all of your nutrients through food first versus having to resort to supplements. And we know that there's a time or place for supplements, if we need to treat low levels or if we're, not getting enough in our diet, that's when it could be beneficial. Okay. Myth number 6. Juice cleanses, coffee enemas, and other detoxes are good for cancer prevention and treatment. Let's debunk this one. So I just want to define detox just so we know what we're talking about. So when I say detox, it's really referring to the body's processes that helps us render toxins less harmful. So detoxing is a way we can make toxins in our body less harmful so that we can excrete them through our urine, our sweat, our stool. So marketers of detox products, diets, and supplements claim that they can cleanse your system and provide benefits like reduced inflammation, more energy, weight loss, and many other claims. And I want you to remember that the science doesn't support these claims. Our body is beautifully designed to detox itself. So we have wonderful organs that are working hard for us each and every day to help us detox, which includes our liver, kidneys, large intestine, lymphatic system, and sweat glands, which all work together to help reduce the body burden of chemicals. And then we'll excrete these chemicals in urine, feces, and sweat. So detox diets and pills and products are not without risk, so we want to beware. Detox supplements, just like the other supplements we talked about, don't have to be reviewed for safety and effectiveness by the FDA. There's been undeclared drugs found in detox supplements, such as active ingredients found in an obesity treatment drug. There's been detox supplements that have been found to have ingredients that the FDA doesn't even consider safe. Certain detox supplements have been found to be contaminated with heavy metals like lead and arsenic. Even salmonella was found in a detox supplement. There's an ingredient in detox supplements called zeolite. It's really common in a lot of detox products that actually can lead to reduced nutrient absorption because of what it does in our stomachs. Coffee enemas, a lot of people, have heard the buzz about coffee enemas and helping detox, and we know that it doesn't come without risk. So there's actually reports of death from coffee enemas. It could perforate our intestinal wall, cause blood infection. So these risks are important to consider. And really strict detox diets that are out there, they're dangerous. They can lead to electrolyte abnormalities, malnutrition, vitamin and mineral deficiencies, diarrhea, fatigue, and more. I can't tell you the amount of times I've had someone in my office who has been harmed from a restrictive diet, such as a detox diet. Now, there are things we can do to naturally support our metabolic detoxification system so we can help our organs detox for us. And how can we do that? So, here's some tips. Avoiding alcohol. Alcohol is a toxin. Exercise, sweating is really helpful in helping us excrete toxins. We can focus on reducing toxin exposure in ways that are within our control, such as reducing exposure to canned foods and plastics and choosing safer household products and more. Eating a plant-based diet actually helps us provide our body with nutrients like vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, and fiber that help support our liver detoxification system. Staying hydrated. We want to make sure we're staying hydrated so we can flush toxins out in our urine. Eating enough protein each day. So, protein is actually a key nutrient that helps our liver process toxins to eliminate from the body. Going organic when possible to reduce our toxin exposure, such as exposure from from pesticides and heavy metals and herbicides. Choosing wild caught fish and lower mercury fish. And we'll share in the chat, there's wonderful resources for choosing safer fish, including the Environmental Working Group Seafood Buying Guide and the Monterey Bay Aquarium Seafood Watch Guide. And eating enough. I can't stress this enough. A lot of the detox diets out there are restricting calories, not getting enough protein or energy, also known as calories that your body needs. And we need calories to fuel pathways to move toxins out of our system. So we want to avoid crash dieting, including these very popular detox diets. So we have so many resources, part of the Anti-Cancer Lifestyle Program, that are free to you. So you can learn how to reduce toxins in your home environment and in your food. So be sure to check out these free resources, and we will link them in the chat. So instead of detox diets and products which come with risk and are not evidence-based, focus on eating whole plant-based foods, getting adequate fiber in from whole plant foods, reducing toxin exposure, getting more exercise, avoiding alcohol, and staying hydrated. All right, myth number 7, last but certainly not least. It's too expensive to eat an anti-cancer diet. Let's talk more about why this is simply a myth. We know that reducing animal protein intake, especially meat, as part of an anti-cancer diet can actually help save us money. Plant-based proteins are much cheaper than meat. So things like beans and lentils. And I want to give you an example of this because a lot of my patients, when I say this, don't believe me until I pull out the facts. So according to, it was a 2023 average retail of food and energy prices, a pound of extra lean ground beef was about on average, $7 a pound and provides 117 grams of protein. So if we compare this to the price and protein content of 1 pound of dried beans, which, any type of beans, just a pound of dried beans, on average, dried beans cost about $1.70 a pound compared to the lean ground beef, which is about $7 a pound. So significant difference there. And get this, the beans provides us with dried beans. A pound makes about 6 cups of beans cooked, which is quite a bit of beans, and 246 grams of protein. So 1 pound of the ground beef has 117 grams of protein. So you're getting more protein from the beans at a significantly lower price. So we know that we can obtain all of our protein we need from plants, and plant-based proteins are cheaper than meat. So here are some other ways to eat anti-cancer on a budget, eat an anti-cancer diet on a budget. So as we talked about, choosing plant-based proteins, limiting meat if you consume meat, using the environmental working group Dirty Dozen and Clean 15 lists can really help you prioritize your food dollar to spend your dollars on the Dirty Dozen, the list of the top 12 produce items that have been found to have the most pesticides and herbicides. Consider joining a CSA, buying food in season, purchasing food from local organic farms. Maybe if you check out the farmers market, I know where I am, there's not many vendors, if any, who have the organic certification. But if you actually talk to them, they're growing affordable food and growing the food without the use of harmful chemicals. Buying frozen fruits and veggies when eating out of season can make it much more affordable, organic if possible. Buying in bulk, and this leads to avoiding convenience, the single serving items. They tend to drive up the price of, the convenient foods like cheese that's shredded, single servings, like string cheese that's in the single servings, and, pre-cut and prepped fruits and veggies. Those tend to cost more. So if you're looking to save money, avoid the convenience. Check out the Environmental Working Group's Good Food on a Tight Budget resource, which we will share in the chat. It is completely free. And plan meals each week, taking into account what you have on hand and curating, a meal plan for the week, planning out your meals using things you have on hand and creating a grocery list from that so that you're, using what you have so you're not spending more money than you need to at the grocery store. Okay, we did it. We together busted the top cancer food myths. So we know that sugar does not need fuel cancer. It doesn't need to be avoided. We now know that eating soy foods does not cause cancer. In fact, soy has tons of anti-cancer benefits. We know that consuming dairy products does not cause cancer. What we want to be mindful of is the association with prostate cancer that we see. So if you're interested in prostate cancer prevention or preventing recurrence, or if you have prostate cancer, consume dairy in moderation, if at all, and especially milk. If I already have cancer, then it doesn't matter what I eat or drink. This is false. We learned that nutrition matters immensely in all stages of cancer initiation and progression. We know that the more vitamin and mineral supplements does not mean better. There's significant risks that come with taking vitamin and mineral supplements. Juice cleanses, coffee enemas, and other detoxes are not good for cancer prevention and treatment. The data does not support this. And we know we can eat an anti-cancer diet on a budget. So in summary, our diet quality plays a strong role in decreasing our risk of cancer, more so than any one food or ingredient or beverage. We have to take into account, for the most part, what are we eating and drinking throughout the day? Looking at that bigger picture of our diet. We know that diets higher in fruits, vegetables, whole grains like whole grain breads and pastas and brown rice and oatmeal and quinoa, all of these whole grains, plant-based proteins like beans and lentils and soy products, and unsaturated fats like avocados, nuts, seeds, fat found in fatty fish. These are all linked to reduced risk of cancer. And the research is clear on that. Okay, So I want to share with you something we just launched. If you're interested in learning more from me and getting a kickstart in changing your eating habits, I want to share with you the 7-day diet kickstart. So it's free, completely free. It's only 15 minutes a day. We'll share with you how to sign up. You could sign up right on the website. And essentially, in 15 minutes a day for 1 week, we go through various topics together. I'm your guide. We go through the topics of anti-inflammatory foods, mindful eating, how to grocery shop for nutritious foods, ultra processed foods, what they are, why it's beneficial to reduce or eliminate them, fiber and gut health, non-toxic cooking, and we even share some awesome, delicious, and nutritious recipes. So if you want to join me and continue this journey, be sure to sign up now. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Crystal. That was fantastic. Before I move on to Q&A, we do have a survey, the QR code you can see right there, and Nicole will drop a link to it in the chat. We would love for you to share your thoughts in our quick post-webinar survey. Together, we shape better experiences, and your feedback really helps us continue on the right track for you all. Okay, let's get to questions. Thank you all who submitted. We had so many questions come in advance and so many during the webinar I saw. I will try to combine. There were a lot of similar questions. And please just keep in mind that we have many resources related to concerns around nutrition, especially our ebooks, which are like condensed webinars with our experts. For this Q&A session, we will be sticking to questions that relate specifically to the topics that Crystal has covered this evening. So let's get started. Crystal, is it better to eat more vegetables even if they're not organic, or is it better to eat less if they all are organic?
So hands down, the research is clear. Whether organic or conventional, the more fruits and veggies, the better. So there are, absolutely, we want to include fruits and veggies in our diet to help reduce our cancer risk, whether conventional or organic. That's priority number one.
What are your thoughts on consuming soy or ground flaxseed with breast cancer?
So soy, as we discussed, and specifically for breast cancer, I recommend consuming whole soy-based foods. If someone has breast cancer or is looking to prevent breast cancer, soy has anti-cancer benefits. And it's in the webinar, I mentioned how soy is not the only plant food that has those phytoestrogens that we're actually finding have these powerful anti-cancer properties. Flax seeds do as well. So flax seeds have lignans, which are a phytoestrogen and have anti-cancer properties. So I would say, it is recommended to eat and enjoy whole food soy or minimally processed soy and flaxseed if you have breast cancer or are looking to prevent breast cancer.
We received a lot of questions about safe sugar alternatives like monk fruit, coconut sugar, date sugar. What are your thoughts on these types of sugar alternatives?
Oh, okay. I love answering this question. So I'm going to give you what the science shows, and then I'm going to give you my professional opinion based on the science, my clinical experience, and what I know, the nutrition knowledge that I have about food and the body and how the body works. So here's my thought. In small amounts, the more natural artificial sweeteners like monk fruit and stevia, there's less concerns that I've seen, especially I haven't seen any studies showing negative or harmful or safety concerns with monk fruit, some with stevia, but for the most part, it's really the other artificial sweeteners like aspartame is a big one that recently came out with showing some really concerning research. So if you're going to consume artificial sweeteners, I do recommend sticking with more of the natural ones like stevia or monk fruit. But here's the thing. Ideally, I tell all my patients this. I said, I would rather you just wean off of artificial sweeteners altogether because one, we don't know what the long-term results are going to show us from stevia. More research is coming out. It's relatively newer compared to the other ones. Same thing with monk fruit, where we don't have a ton of data on it right now. Who knows in 5, 10, 15 years what we'll find. And nonetheless, my professional opinion is largely related to, because in small amounts, it's these artificial sweeteners are unlikely to cause any negative health effects. It's really if you're having them in large quantities. But here's where my concern comes in, where I recommend actually just consuming the real thing, the regular natural sweeteners like maple syrup, honey, or even just regular sugar in moderation. Because these sweeteners like stevia and monk fruit are many times sweeter than actual sugar, just regular table sugar. So what is that doing to our taste, our tolerance for sugar? Because we know our taste buds will change. So over the course of, a couple weeks, like 3 to 4 weeks, if you start to reduce, the sweetness in your diet, the sugar in your diet, your taste buds, your tolerance for sugar will go down. If you're consuming artificial sweeteners that are many times sweeter than sugar, we're not retraining your taste buds to adapt to have a lower tolerance for sugar. So that is the main reason why I don't recommend them. And ideally, I tell people, I would rather you just use sugar in moderation than these artificial sweeteners because we're keeping your taste buds attuned to a very high tolerance for the sweet taste.
And just a reminder, as I mentioned at the beginning, we are going to take some more questions. So this webinar will go a few minutes over. If you do have to drop off, again, this will be emailed to you and can be located in our on our website. So don't worry, you'll still get the full Q&A even if you have to drop off. So this probably has been told to people in various different ways. But this one person was told no soy after breast cancer. Then the doctor switched a little and said, okay, but nothing with soy lecithin. What do you think?
So I think that, based on the research that we have, soy is absolutely safe, as we learned, including soy lecithin. It's an emulsifier. It's known to be relatively safe. I have not seen any safety concerns regarding soy lecithin. So, and I think this is really just speaks to the value of having a dietitian on your healthcare team, because part of my role as a dietitian is, to talk with my patients' providers and share studies and data, to show, that, actually maybe, there was some outdated research that showed us that there was some concerns about soy, like those rodent studies I mentioned, but now we have this new data. So I think having going to the nutrition expert and having a dietitian on your team who is the nutrition expert part of the healthcare team is invaluable for this reason, so that we can help educate doctors and reassure you, what has been associated with something like increased cancer risk or recurrence, and what you don't have to worry about. So soy lecithin, I would not worry, known to be safe, and whole and minimally processed soy products like tofu, tempeh, edamame, as we talked about in the webinar, I would absolutely recommend.
Good to know. You mentioned, we talked a little bit about protein towards the end of the webinar. What about protein meal replacement shakes? Would those be of any benefit?
So it's really, I often don't recommend them. I think there's a time or place for them, like if we're struggling to get enough protein in our diet. But here's the thing, you really want to look at the ingredients because, like I was mentioning, the ingredients vary so much on these protein meal replacement shakes. And some may have the processed versions of soy, right, that I was talking about, like soy protein isolate, which there's some concerns with how they're isolating those soy components. Other concerns are added sugars, like in those flavored protein replacements, there tends to be a lot of added sugars, which, as we learned, are associated with increased cancer risk. So we'd want to consider the added sugar content. Some of them are really high in sodium or salt too. And sort of like sugar, it's not the salt that we add in our food that's the concern for health. It's the excessive salt that the food companies add that could be in those protein powders. So I think it's hard to generally say. I really take a food first approach with protein. Let's try and get your protein in from food. And as a last resort, we may consider something like a protein powder. But what I would be doing is looking at, has the powder been tested? Has it been third party tested? Because there's some protein powders that have been found to have lead, and I wouldn't want someone getting some protein with a side of lead. So I just want to provide a little tip here that I love to share with my patients. Silken tofu works wonderfully as a protein source in smoothies, and you often don't even taste it. So, a lot of people will use protein powders. I guess meal replacement shakes would be different because you wouldn't make some people make a smoothie with it, but nonetheless, instead of using something like a protein powder, a meal replacement shake, I give that as an example of, are there other things we can consider before resulting to that to get your protein from these whole foods that have tons of benefits without the ingredients of concern?
So I know we have attendees with all coming to us with all different experiences right now. Is this session applicable for all types of cancer? I know we have a few people wondering.
Yes. So if there were concerns regarding specific types of cancer, I made sure, those were mentioned in the webinar. So for instance, like the prostate cancer risk and the with dairy consumption. But all of the other myths, if I didn't mention anything for a specific type of cancer to consider, yes, if I didn't mention it, it does apply to all types of cancer. And that's also not to, I don't want to not acknowledge that when certain types of cancers, we know your cancer treatment's going to depend on what type of cancer you have. Your nutrition needs will be different depending on the type of cancer you have. So it's not to, I think there's so much value in still having, if possible, an oncology dietitian on your team to address the nutrition concerns with certain types of cancers that are unrelated to the myths we talked about. Maybe there's other nutrition concerns. And you might be on certain cancer treatments where there's some nutrition consideration. So I think if you can have a dietitian on your team, but regarding the myths, absolutely, this applies across the board.
Crystal, why do we use American Heart Association's recommendations when it comes to cancer? Are there cancer risk recommendations?
So I want to clarify this. The American Heart Association guidelines are for added sugar intake, not for cancer risk. So essentially, my intention for sharing that is I find that the American Heart Association guidelines on how much to limit added sugar to, because we know for cancer risk, we want to limit added sugars as much as possible. And the American Heart Association has these added sugar guidelines that are actually on the stricter side. So it's the less than 6 teaspoons for women, less than 9 teaspoons for men. And I use that one just because I find that having the recommendations in teaspoons, what to limit to, can help us when we're label reading for added sugar. So we can picture like that strawberry yogurt, so that we can picture, oh, this has 3.25 teaspoons of sugar. And if, ballpark range, I have this general guideline that, less than 6 teaspoons if I'm a female, then I know, wow, this is more than half of my added sugar using those guidelines. So it's not related to cancer risk directly, these guidelines. It's just guidelines for limiting added sugar for health and well-being. And for cancer risk, we don't have a specific limit for sugar. It's just the less, the better. And that's why I like to use the American Heart Association guidelines, just to give you an example of what constitutes less.
Thank you. What are your thoughts on orange juice? Is it okay to drink it to prevent a breast cancer recurrence? Is there too much sugar in it?
So when it comes to juice, I always say, um, uh, ideally, I wouldn't recommend juice just because when, how we talked about sugar and fiber and how they're simple sugars in fruit. So we have fructose, which is the simple sugar in fruit, like oranges. And as soon as we juice fruit, this goes for all fruits, whether oranges or apples, we throw out, or we're left, maybe compost it. Hopefully we don't throw it out, but we get rid of nonetheless the roughage or that fiber. And that is really what helps us stabilize our blood sugar levels and has those benefits. Fiber gives us those blood sugar benefits. So when you take oranges and make orange juice, or this goes for any fruit juice, but I'll use orange juice as an example. You have to use a lot of oranges, a good amount, more than you'd probably eat in one sitting to make the orange juice. And then you're getting all that sugar without the fiber. So it is going to be more likely to be absorbed rather quickly and raise blood sugar. It's one of the reasons why if someone has diabetes and has low blood sugar, I say drink 4 ounces of juice to get that blood sugar up quick. So if you don't have low blood sugar and don't need to get your blood sugar up quickly, I would avoid juice. And I also think the recommendation too, if you do have juice, like 100% juice with no added sugar, limit to about 4 ounces and you can dilute it. So if you want the taste of that, and you do get some nutrients from fruit juice, like vitamin C and antioxidants, for instance, but keep it to 4 ounces and then dilute it if you choose to have fruit juice. 4 ounces a day, I would say.
All right, we have time for one more question. Crystal, what is better, not no fat dairy or organic?
Ooh, okay. So I would say choose organic when you can for all types of dairy. So whether that's yogurt or kefir or butter, choosing if you consume dairy, choosing organic when you can. And when it comes to low fat versus full fat, it really depends. The answer isn't as clear cut. So I recommend if someone's consuming a significant amount of dairy throughout their day, maybe they're having cheese on their salad and then lasagna for dinner that has cheese and then having a glass of milk with breakfast. If we're having, a good amount of dairy with our meals or frequently throughout the day, that's when I would suggest considering low fat options. Now, if you're consuming dairy in moderation, like having a yogurt and not much else dairy in your diet, there's actually benefits to choosing the higher fat. So the fat is satiating. So I have seen where when we start to choose all low fat things, including dairy, then people end up eating more because they're not full or satiated. So fat is important. We do need it and it provides satiation. So I'd much rather someone choose the full fat dairy and eat it in moderation than choose lower fat that may have, oftentimes they're adding stuff to the low fat, not always, but they may add like a lot of sugar to it and stabilizers and other things. So, in summary, if you're having a significant amount of dairy in your diet, choose low fat if you can. And if you're consuming dairy moderately, like we recommend for an anti-cancer diet, I would say choose what you enjoy. If you feel satisfied with low fat dairy and it's just as yummy to you, then choose a low fat. But if you find that full fat, sometimes depending on what our body's telling us too, like if it's a day where you haven't gotten a lot of fat in, a full fat yogurt may be the most satiating sounding thing with some berries and nuts versus if you had a day where maybe you did get enough fat, there was adequate fat in other meals, maybe a full fat yogurt doesn't even sound appetizing. Maybe a low fat yogurt sounds more appetizing. So it's really interesting how our body may tell us when we need more fat and maybe when we could benefit from less fat because we've already been getting more than we need. So I hope that answers that question. It's more complex than just say low fat or full fat.
Yes, and listening to your body's cues, you're so good about educating about that. So good that we have an ebook about it actually called Food and You. Anyways, thank you all for attending this evening. Thank you, Crystal, for your time. We all very much appreciate everyone. Please fill out our survey. I'll see you on social media. See you at the next event. Keep your eye on our newsletters to find out when that is. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for having me.